Hi there guys, Tom Love here. Gonna do a bit of a question and answer session. I've been planning this for a while, just never really got round to doing it. Just answering some of your betting related questions, football related questions, that'll hopefully give you a bit of information that you might find useful. So there's quite a few questions to get through. Hopefully they're all relevant. The first one that I've been asked is, what's your best technique for long-lasting profit? I think the main thing with this is sticking to a staking plan, um, and betting on value bets. It's something that I'm going to mention quite often. Is don't bet on something that isn't decent value, just because you're going to end up down in the long run. There's a very small percentage of people who will actually make profit from betting. A lot of people do it recreationally, and that's absolutely fine. That's what I do at the minute. Just look to try and make more money than I do lose. But it's very important to only bet what you can afford to lose, and no more than that. So yeah, I think having a staking system in place is really helpful. If you don't and you don't track this, then you don't know if you are making profit or not at the end of the day. So tracking your bets as well would be something that I'd really recommend. Second question is, what is your maximum amount of units staked per day? And that really just depends on how many good bets there are on that specific day. I mean, if it's a Saturday and there's a lot of bets that I like, there's a lot of bets that represent big value, then I will get involved with that. And it doesn't really matter if there's nothing for the whole week after that, then I won't have a bet. It just depends on when the value is, I guess. And you don't have to have the same stakes every day either. That's something that you just creating a problem for yourself, I think, really. And the third question is, do you stay away from in-play betting? That's something that I don't do as much now, mainly because I don't really have time to look at in-play bets as much as I did in the past. It is something that I did quite a bit in the past to quite a decent a decent profit, especially on like the corner markets and the card markets. When you're getting into the last 20 minutes, I think I've got a real way in there. And one of the questions further down here, I'll just answer that now because it does tie in with that. Is, what's your play? How do you play corners in play? What gives you confidence in corner bets landing? Because they are quite random, which there is a point in that. They can be quite random, but I kind of follow three strict rules when I'm looking at in-play bets on corner markets, and I'm mainly going to be using the race to X amount of corners, which is something that Bet365 do, and I think Betfair and Paddy Power do it as well. So you can bet on a team to get to 7 corners, for instance, before the opposition, and the prices on them generally are quite good, I find. And the few rules that I have is you've got to be backing a team that are losing the game, because there's more chance of them getting corners, because naturally they're going to have the ball much more in their attacking half. They're going to be piling the pressure on. The defensive team are going to be in a deep block, and they'll be kind of just heading balls out of the box. The opposition team will be having lots of shots, which could lead to saves and deflections, which lead to corners. So the team has to be losing if you're going to get on the corners for them. It does help as well if you can be actually watching the game, so you can understand how their rhythm of play is. If they're getting wing backs overlapping, that's another bonus. But generally, it's going to be a team losing who are at home. That does tend to increase the chances as well, I've found, because the home crowd are getting behind them to get forward and to get shots off. And the price has to be decent as well. I mean, you don't want to back odds on for a team to get 2 more corners when there's only 5 minutes left. You want at least 2-1 in that situation, I find. But you can even wait on till quite late in the game and get on if you think that there's going to be a lot of added time. This is something that I think is quite it's missed by the bookies in a lot of ways, because if you're watching a game and there's been a bad injury, there could be about 7 or 8 minutes added time. The bookmakers don't tend to actually cover that with the prices. So if I'm watching a game and there's 10 minutes left and then there's extra time added on to that, and you can get a team who are losing, who are at home, for example, they're on 5 corners, the other team are on 1 corner, and you back them race to 7 corners and you're getting around 15-8 or 2-1, then that would represent massive value, because they're only taking into consideration kind of 10 minutes plus the average added time, 2 or 3 minutes, but you're getting an extra 5 minutes there, and that never really gets factored into the price, from what I've found anyway. So that's another one to keep an eye on. Having a gauge on how much added time there's going to be, it means you can get a bit more juice out of the price. Bit of a long-winded answer that, so sorry if you didn't follow it all, but yeah, I'd say corners is where I am within players more than anything else. Next question is, did you start from scratch and did you do low stakes first, or did you get a bet up and just decide to be a punter from then on? Obviously everyone starts from scratch. It's just been having a little tickle on a few accumulators when I was kind of 17, 18. Whenever I could get a little bet on, I would, for a bit of interest, and it just sparks your curiosity really as to why certain teams are certain prices. What goes into making them prices really did interest me, and from then on you kind of get more into it and you can find angles in where you get a bit more value, maybe on singles and stuff like that. But I'm only 23 at the minute, and I only left university in the summer, so you haven't had much chance to build up a decent bank to bet too seriously. So I tend to be quite recreational at the minute. I don't put stupid stakes on unless there's something that really does stand out, kind of an outlier, and then I will have a decent wager on that. But I do tend to be do bet for fun more than anything, and that really is an important message to get out there. You've got to enjoy it. If you don't, just don't bet. The next question is, what's your favourite market to bet on? That's a very good question. At the minute, it's more the player stats markets that interest me, because there is ways to find out player shot stats, tackle stats, passing stats. You can find the averages out and try and work out if bookmakers are offering a price that is in line with that. And because it's quite a new market, you can exploit it. Not as much these days. You could at the start of the season. I had real success in these markets in the first kind of 3 months. They're kind of getting on top of it now. A few bookies are pulling them from the sites as well, which is a shame, because it really does offer something interesting to get your teeth stuck into. But generally, it does tend to be the player stats, or you're looking at the Asian handicap markets, which I really enjoy betting on, just because you kind of limit your liability a bit, and you can bet on different ways in. If you fancy a team to avoid defeat, but the price is a little bit shorter than you expected, you can still back them with plus a quarter goal on the Asian handicap and you still get half stakes profit. Stuff like that really does appeal, just because you get a bit more on your side, and because there's a lot more liquidity in these markets, you can get kind of decent margins and fairer prices. And the next question is, how do you know if a market is underpriced? Well, a lot of it's down to individual interpretation, I guess, when it comes to this. How much weighting do you put on recent results, expected goals? How far do you go back with your research and on these kind of things? I think instead of looking at results to kind of draw up your own price, I look at performance data, so your expected goals and kind of your underlying metrics that go with that, shots in the box, kind of dangerous situations. There's a lot of different metrics that you can find online. So they would be what I'd kind of get on board more with. It would make me feel a lot more confident in backing a team that has a good expected goals figure rather than a team like, say, Crystal Palace this season or Newcastle, who are actually doing quite well in the league table, but their data is poor. They're winning quite luckily. I wouldn't have as much confidence in backing them to win. I'd rather have a team that creates the chances to score them goals more frequently. A lot of people have different views on stuff like this, but I think the overall pattern of a game and the chances that you create and the quality of those chances is much more important than just the end result, because football is a low-scoring game naturally, and strange things do happen. You know, teams that get battered do end up winning. So you've just got to kind of put trust in whatever you're going to do, and my trust is in kind of the XG. So that's the way that I go with all of that. The next question is, it looks like 90% or more of your bets are singles, and you rarely dip into ACCAs, which seems sensible given how few of the latter actually come in. However, when you look at an ACCA, is 3 or 4 games the maximum you'd put together? That is a good question. Again, it comes back to what you're wanting to get out of it. If you're just wanting to have a fun punt on something where you can think, oh, I can make £500 from a fiver, then do your rackers. That's fine, because you're not putting lots of money on the line, and you've got that chance. Really, it's that buzz. It's kind of the psychology of betting, which is quite interesting as well when it comes to this. People bet for the fun and the thrill, which is absolutely fine. It's just like any other hobby. I mean, if you pay to, I don't know, go mountain biking or something like that, and you get a thrill out of that, then it's just the same with betting, as long as you're being sensible. So I don't mind people playing ACCAs. I do them myself now and again. I don't tend to post them online, just because some people in the past have kind of said, "Oh, why didn't that win?" Well, because it's 40-1 or something. That's why. It's just for a bit of fun, and you do have a chance of winning. But yeah, I tend to do kind of four or 5 games if I'm putting an ACCA together. But yeah, when I'm having a serious bet, I don't touch multiples whatsoever. Just because there's quite a lot that has to go in your favour. And it's true that bookies love punters who just play ACCAs all the time, because at the end of the day, they're going to make the money from that. It's the singles that can worry them. A bit of a broader question, this one. Which is the best bookmakers to bet with? And again, that really depends on what market you want. I mentioned the player stats stuff. That's been available on Sky Bet, on Coral, on Betfair, Paddy Power. They all do that, the player shots market. But the one that I really like in terms of player stats is Coral, just because they offer this bet builder feature where you can pick a player, and you can pick him to have X amount of shots outside the box, passes, tackles, all sorts of stuff, and you can kind of tailor that and get a price straight away, which is unique. And fair play to Coral for putting their neck on the line with stuff like that, because they tend to do all of the major European leagues as well. So I've used that quite a lot this year, and come one tackle or one shot away about 50 times, it seems, on bets that are kind of double figure prices. But it does give you a bit of fun, and I do think there is value in them if you can get on early enough anyway, because these markets do get cut in really significantly, which is a real shame, but it's understandable with the lack of liquidity in a lot of them. I think Betfair can be standout price for shots on target and shots, but again, it's when you get on board with them. I don't think Sky Bet are too good in terms of prices for stuff like shots and tackles or anything like that. They kind of got all of them covered, so I don't tend to bet with them for that. But I'd say more generally, what I've noticed is that Bet Victor tend to be best price on correct scores. So if you're a correct score punter, more often than not, they'll be best price, even if it's just by half a point. And they offer kind of Asian goal lines, Asian handicaps as well. Bet365 are good as well for Asian handicaps, goal lines. They offer free kick markets on their bet builder as well, which is good. They're really good for the bet builders, as you say, like players to score, players to be carded. I like to do them for a bit of fun as well. So that I'll tend to look for them first and foremost when I'm looking at players to be carded and stuff like that. But you can check all of these things on Odds Checker, which is a really useful. It's like an odds comparison site if you haven't heard of it before, and it kind of just gives you a list of I don't know, around 15 bookmakers and best price on win markets, player to be carded markets, pretty much everything apart from the kind of the player stats stuff, which is understandable. So yeah, they've all got the plus points. I think generally, if I'm having a bet on the basic markets, it will be on Bet365. But then if I'm using the player stats, it will be Coral usually or Betfair. But my account's being restricted with both of them now, which is a bit of a nightmare. And that actually brings me nicely onto the next question. What's your biggest frustration in betting? I think that exactly that really. Bookmakers make so much money from punters who don't really bet seriously. They just bet for the fun of it, and they take the profit from that. But whenever someone makes a bit of money out of them, they have the chance to just cut your stakes to next to nothing, which is a real shame. And it's something that really does frustrate me because they don't really have to do it. It's not like people like me who bet kind of fivers and tenors are gonna make them bankrupt. It's just a bit daft, really. And I think that, along with pretty much the same two that I've just mentioned, they cut the prices on player shots, tackles, all of these markets, really, really significantly, which I just think's ridiculous. It kind of goes to show what the traders are doing. They don't really have a clue. If they're pricing someone up 14-1 for 2 or more shots on target, and I do some calculations and they average 1 shot on target per game, then that should be significantly shorter than that. But they've just put that price out there. As soon as someone bets on it, it just comes straight in, and it makes it very hard to tip up because the price goes within a minute, and then as soon as that does happen, they tend to restrict your stakes. So that's a really annoying thing as well. So Yeah, they're my two bugbears, especially in the market. It kind of draws you into betting more on the basic markets, which isn't really my style. Um, so yeah, I think they're my two main bugbears, as I say. Another question. This is one I get asked a lot: is what's the best sites to get player and card stats? I use free sites really. WhoScored.com is the best, I think, for this. They've got loads of tabs to check team stats, comparing teams in the league for cards, shots against, stuff like that. And then if you go on a team, go down the list of players, you can click on them, and they've got a tab which shows you how many shots they have, tackles, interceptions, successful dribbles, unsuccessful touches, pretty much anything that you can list. They've got it on there for the top 5 leagues in Europe, and I think they've got it for the EFL now as well. So that's one that really gets a lot of usage out of me. You can also look at shot zones and accuracy, stuff like that, which is useful if you go under the detail tab on that. I think what's useful for referee databases is Soccerware. If you've seen a match and a certain referee's got that match and you want to check out his stats, type his name into the search tab on Soccerware, and you can find out what games he's been refereeing, how many cards he's given out, etc. So I use Soccerware for that, which is another good site. I also subscribe to an app called StatZone, which is really good. I think it's only a tenner a year, so next to nothing really. And it records all manner of stats really. It updates in play as well, which is really nice. And it's got stats for the top 5 leagues. Again, it's really good graphically and visually. It shows you where shots have been from, if they've been blocked, passes, and all sorts of stuff. You'll see lines all over a graph, which it can get a bit confusing, but you can see exactly what they're determining on that, and that's something that I use quite a lot now, and I think it's actually quite good value for a tenner. Um, so I would recommend that if you're into kind of your player stats bets specifically. Um, so yeah, I think them three are the main ones that I use. I'm sure there's a few more, but they're the main ones. What's the biggest misconception around betting, or what annoys you the most? Again, it's pretty similar to the last question. I think what annoys me is impatient people. I mean, people basically, if you see someone on Twitter, for example, who says, "Oh, look at this! This is a banker," I'd just unfollow them or block them straight away because they don't really know what they're on about. Nothing's a banker. Um, you've just got to find bets that represent value. It comes back to that. If you've done all your research on the sites that I've just mentioned, and you found a bet that's at a price that's bigger than what you determine it to be at, after you've done all of your calculations, then it to you it should be a value bet. And then if it loses, it's not a bad bet. That's another thing that people kind of get wrong. Any losing bet, people will say, "Oh, that's a rubbish bet." It's not. It's a good bet. It just lost, and that's very hard for people to get their head around sometimes. But if you've done all of that um, research, then and you'd back it again tomorrow, even if it lost. Like recently, I had a decent wager on Linz against Man United, on Linz to have X amount of shots. I backed 13, 14, 17, and 19. In the end, they had about 10 shots. All of them bets lost. But I'd back that again today because the stats back it up. In the Europa League, for instance, they had the most amount of shots on average at 19 per game, and you were getting 12 to 1 on that when it was averaging exactly that. So that wasn't a bad bet, but it lost, and you just got to take the hit on that. Um, that can be hard sometimes. Obviously, you've done all that research and you're really confident on something, and it just doesn't come off. But you just got to take it, I guess. More often than not, they will come in. Um, Also, people that just want a tip, a betting tip without any backbone to it. There's a lot of places which are very dodgy. I find that kind of just put a list of bet on this, 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 and this, and it's if you're just going off that and backing stuff blindly without having any research done behind it or any proof of research, then I'd be very skeptical. That's why I think it's really important to read through articles and understand why a person's tipped a certain bet up. Um, a lot of people are just too lazy in that regard, and that really does annoy me as well. And then they'll be annoyed if they just bet on something that's just been put up with no reasoning behind it and it loses. People say, "Oh, that's rubbish." Well, listen, learn, and start to make your own judgments from that once you've read through a certain piece. A few of these questions are quite similar, so I'll try rattle through a few more. Is betting your main income source? If so, what was your journey to reaching that level? It's not, no, not at the minute anyway. Um, it, I've got a job just like everyone else, an office job. I just bet recreationally, as I said before, but I do enjoy researching different tips and stuff like that. So it's something I just tend to do for fun. Maybe in the future it could be something that I'd look to do professionally. But again, you need to have a decent bank behind you to get to that point. And obviously, with me being relatively young for someone in this market, I haven't really had much time to build up that, especially with university and how much that all costs. So I just see it as a hobby at the minute, and just spend what any kind of spare odd money that I have. I put it in an account even, and just bet with that for the month. If it runs out, it runs out. Just don't bet any more than you can afford to lose. It's quite simple. Can be hard for some people. Some people do tend to chase, and that is a problem in the industry. And that's something that they're trying to get a hold on with all this responsible gambling, advertising, and stuff like that. Absolutely right to do that as well. It can get out of hand. That's why I think having deposit limits are really important as well. Every bookies offer it. It's so easy to just bet with money that you can't see, and if you've got to imagine yourself going into a bookmakers and putting £50 of your own money down on a bet which you don't really have much of a clue about, just because you want to get your winnings back. It's harder when it is all online. I appreciate that, but yeah, I'd definitely look at having deposit limits if you want to kind of keep in control and stop chasing, because it is a serious problem, and that's why they're there basically. And you can alter them to the amounts that you see fit, basically. The next question is: do you aim to win a certain amount each week and month? It's a fair question, but no, I don't. Some months can be quiet. Well, just at the minute, there's no football on, so there's no real bets to be found. So no, that my answer short is no to that. How do you deal with losing runs, and any notes as to what to do when you are on a losing run? That's something that I'd probably look to find from someone a bit more experienced than myself. I don't want to be giving up too much on stuff like this, but I can just go off what I personally think, and it's very hard because you start doubting yourself as a tipster. I don't really like being called a tipster, but as someone who recommends, I guess, bets, I think that you've just got to be able to back it up. And if you can, then if it loses and it loses the day after, and say you go a week, you put up 7 bets and they all lose. I mean, that's how it can be sometimes. But then again, you can have a week where you put up 7 bets and they all win as well. So I guess it's about bankroll management. It comes back to that. Only bet what you can afford to lose. If you've got a pot there and it runs out, just don't put anything else in it. Just take a break. You don't have to bet. I think that's the important thing. And if you're not enjoying it, then don't. And it's hard to enjoy it when you are on a losing run. But I kind of it's tempting to set stakes accordingly. But I presume if you do play with level stakes and you're very confident on your selections, then I'd keep to level stakes. But then again, if that does run out, then I can totally understand why people will just not bet after a losing run. Take a break, take a week off, or wait until kind of a fixture that really stands out comes towards you, because obviously confidence does drop when you are on a losing run, and it is a struggle. But just as an example, really, last summer at uni, I had next to no money. I was doing a part-time job at a shop just to cover my rent and bills, which were quite expensive, and I just couldn't afford to risk betting anything. So then you just suspend your account for X amount of months and just don't bet. It does take discipline, but you've got to weigh things up and value the stuff that really matters, I guess. And yeah, if it is a serious losing run, just take time out, build your bank back up, and wait for kind of your confidence to grow again, I guess. Let's see what we got. A few more general questions on this. Well, these were written up a few months ago, or about a month ago. Who do you fancy to win the Europa League and League One? Well, no one at the minute because it's probably not going to happen. But I did put Wolves at 14-1, and Peterborough were at 10-1. I'm not sure they'll carry on from now, but yeah, them two did look quite big at the time of writing. Anyway, I think Peterborough went down to about 2-1, maybe even shorter, but they've had a bit of a base since then. Now we've gone to the question: very, very topical. What do you expect to happen with the current football season? I can't. I think it will get completed just because there's so much on the line financially. They kind of need to, because if they don't, there's going to be a lot of lawsuits flying about, and that's not going to be very easy to sort out. I guess they might have to. Well, they are going to have to play it behind closed doors if they do. I'd just try and rattle the games out pretty much as quick as possible. Try and have two games a week, every week for a month or something, and try and get it done. Just because I think if you did void the season, it would just throw up so many problems. But I can understand why people would say that, just because of the crisis that's going on at the minute, some things are more important. But yeah, I'm not really someone to ask about medical advice. I didn't do a degree in that. What, as a Bradford fan, would your ideal goal be for the next season? And what would you like in place, if anything, at your club? Well, to get promoted. We've been rubbish for the large majority of the season, to be honest. I can't believe we've still got a chance of getting playoffs. What I'd like stability. Keep Stuart McCall as manager. Let him build his own squad. Let him have a managerial stint for 2, 3, 4 years rather than just wanting to get him sacked after 6 months or something like that. So stability and progression, I guess. Get out of this awful league. Sick of League 2 already. It's not pretty. Another topical one. If the future of VAR was down to you, how exactly would you use it? Not use it for specific decisions. I just wouldn't use it. I've never been a fan of it. Ever since it's come in, I just think as a football fan, if certain times or moments were down to VAR, it takes away that ecstasy, which is the main reason why you are a football fan. I mean, I just think it, for example, being a Bradford fan away at Aston Villa in the League Cup semi-final, I don't know how many years back, 6 or 7 years ago, if that James Hansen goal went in and you thought, oh, was there a push in there, and you couldn't celebrate, it would just be awful, because these are the memories that stick with you for the rest of your life. It's the moments of ecstasy that just get taken away by something as silly as that. I've never been a fan of it. I've made that quite clear. Goal line technology is fine to have, but if you're coming down to stuff like millimeters, a toes offside, and stuff like that, it's just stupid. I've never been having that. Football's about them moments, and you can't have them when VAR's in place, because you're always going to be looking, checking if it is a goal or not. So yeah, I'm completely against it, and I hope it does get scrapped, because I can see it just ruining football, and it just takes over as well. I don't want to read stuff about VAR every time I pick up a newspaper. So yeah, not for me. And they are all the questions. It's quite long-winded. So hopefully you've taken a bit from that. If you have got any other kind of questions, betting related or football related, I'm more than happy to answer them on my Twitter account at tomlove_18. And if this has been of use to you, if you'd just like to like or subscribe, that would be massively appreciated. And if you've got any kind of queries or anything you want me to answer in a video format, then do give us a shout. So thanks, guys.